Anastasia, thank you so much
It's a
for
pleasure,
joining.
Marisha. Thank you.
We've been waiting for this for a while. Hey, we were battling to adjust our schedule, so I'm actually looking forward to this chat.
Thank you. I can't believe it's already June and that
Yeah,
we have been missing each other. It's
yeah.
just been such a busy 2025.
Speaking of 2025, what is your take? Because last year we thought, gosh, next year can't be worse. It will only get better.
Yeah.
But so far we felt it could be worse than 24. But how are you guys from a conveyancing side experiencing 25 compared to, the build up in the last couple of years?
Yeah. I often get this question, and it's such a difficult question to answer, and it never used to be like that.
Yeah.
So, in the past, I felt quite confident in understanding the ebbs and the flows of the property market.
Yeah.
And if you'd asked me at a certain time in the year, what do I predict the property market to look like or where it's going, I would be able to confidently answer that question.
Okay.
But things have changed in recent years, and a lot has changed. I think it started with COVID. COVID totally turned things on its head, where we all had this expectation and an anticipation of it being the end of the
Yeah.
property industry. For many of us, those were really good years, surprisingly
Yes.
so.
True.
When we came out of the lockdown, and because of the interest rate cuts, people were buying,
Yeah.
and we were really busy. The property
Yeah.
market was vibrant. And then things started changing again because the banks had to start increasing the interest rates again, and it's been tough. The past 18 months have been tough. They have not been easy. We were all hoping that 2025 would be the turn. There were a lot of things that we hoped were indicating that things would change. Our election, the American election, but who could have predicted what would happen this year internationally? And so it's so difficult to. We all know what effect wars or oil has on rates and the property industry, but nobody could really anticipate what was going to happen this year. So for me personally in my business, the year started really well, and I thought, that's it. I was right at the end of last year when I said that 2025 is going to be much better than 2024. But came March, came April, and it slowed down again. I mean, I think for us in Gauteng, we've always known, that June, July, the winter months are not the greatest months. People don't like to have their properties on show.
Yeah. True.
Their gardens aren't as green as what they want them to be. And it's always traditionally, in the old school sense, been slower months. And I therefore expected it. But I still remain very positive. And I do see the indicators that things are turning, not just with what's happening in the market, but in people's state of minds. People are wanting to buy. People are looking to move. People are planning their lives. People are getting on with their lives. So I sense a lot more of that this year.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So just because I always forget to introduce a guest, but you are in conveyancing.
Yes.
So just tell us for our viewers, what company and how many years in conveyancing without telling your age. We just discovered we're the same age.
Yes. So I director at STBB Attorneys. We're a national practice. We focus on property, but or in my branch, we do. I'm based in the Sandton branch.
Okay.
We have branches all over the country in Cape Town, Gauteng, and KZN, and East London, in the Eastern Cape. But we are litigants, we are commercial attorneys, we are labor attorneys. We cover all aspects of the law. I'm a property attorney. I
Okay.
specialize in commercial, residential, um, sales and bonds, and I absolutely love it. I never thought when I was studying law that I would end up being a conveyancer.
Yeah.
But I absolutely love it. I love the business side of it. I
Yeah.
love the law side of it. I'm a bit of a control freak. So in a property transaction, in litigation, I imagine, an attorney is acting for one of the parties
Yeah.
against another party in a matter. But in conveyancing, in a property transaction, although I'm appointed by the seller, I need to act in the best interest of that transaction. I need to make
Yes.
sure that transaction works, and therefore in the best interest of both parties,
Yeah.
in order to achieve a successful registration.
Yeah.
So I have control over that whole transaction, and I love that.
Which is fantastic. It's interesting. My cousin in Europe, she's a prosecutor,
Yes.
and I was trying to explain to her because they don't have that side. They don't have conveyancer as
Yes.
such. If someone wants an attorney, the buyer, the seller, they have their own attorneys, and then they will have a notary who literally will notarize the sale, and that's it. And I kept. She kept asking me questions, says, but you can't have someone that represents both parties. And this is the first time I've heard it the way you said it now, that it made sense, and I should have explained it to her. So you're not actually, you are acting on behalf of both parties, but you're actually acting on behalf of the transaction, the
Yes.
successful completion
Yeah.
of the transaction. So that is almost like a combined, the deal is what one needs to act on. And the same would apply then to agents, because people will often ask, but who do you represent? And for me, and this is something I try to also when I'm training, younger agents, I always try to explain to them: divorce yourself from the thought that you are acting on this one's behalf or that one, because if you're acting in the interest of the deal, you will get the best for both parties. Because if the deal is successfully finalized, that means the buyer and the seller reached a mutually agreeable ground.
Absolutely. That's absolutely how I see it.
Yeah.
In my experience, what makes a property transaction work? I mean, it is, for many people, it is the biggest transaction of their lives. Financially, but not just financially, emotionally as well.
Yeah.
Buying and selling a home it's emotional, it's intimate. It's, I mean, obviously there are investment properties, but when it's your primary residence,
Yeah.
it's a very stressful process for a seller and a buyer. And so, and I know that from day one, from the day I get the transaction, I know that. I know that I need to not just manage that transaction, I need to manage that seller and that buyer. I need to manage both of them. And if in my mind I'm just acting for the seller, then I'm not going to do that for the buyer. And that has repercussions. That makes a property transaction complicated. So managing both of them is what I need to do. And by doing that, I manage the transaction. And I know then when things go wrong, because things do go wrong. And there's not always consensus between that seller and that buyer. And they start fighting with each other. And then, of course, I need to deal with it legally,
Yeah.
because I have been appointed to act for the seller.
Yeah.
And if we then, the seller and the buyer do, you then do need to refer the purchaser to an attorney or whatever. But if you from day one see it, that you need to make this deal work, you are managing this deal, you are managing both parties, then you very quickly see when there's a problem.
Yeah.
And you can manage it, you can nip it in the bud. You can't always. And then it maybe does become litigious or whatever it is, but it's just reminding yourself the whole time to act in the best interest, to try your very best to act in the best interest of both parties.
So I guess in the sense it's a very nice field in the legal profession, because at the end of the day it is aimed at concluding something successfully, not to the detriment of the one or the other.
Yeah.
Which, I guess in other legal fields, you want to beat
Yes,
someone, you want to
absolutely.
win something against someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, whereas here, the
Yeah.
aim is for all parties to win, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And many times in order to make a deal work, parties need to compromise.
Mm.
One of them needs to compromise, or both of them needs to compromise. We, in a perfect property transaction, the seller and the buyer have consensus regarding everything, every clause in that agreement from day one, and it remains that way.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how often you get those perfect
Not
property
very often.
transactions. Exactly. Neither do I.
Yeah.
So and as a result of that, you've got to find that middle ground the whole time between the seller and it's a dance between the seller and the buyer, which you are managing, and sometimes the one feels they're compromising too more than the other one, but you've just got to balance that out the whole time. And I often speak to the other attorneys at STBB, and we tease each other. And a lot of the litigants, jokingly, will say, "You're not really attorneys. You conveyancers.
Yeah.
It's a different type of law, but it is a law.
Yeah.
And I love that skill that a conveyancer needs to develop
Yeah.
in balancing the relationship
Yeah.
between the two parties,
Yeah.
to make that deal work.
And I mean, I see such massive value in a good conveyancer, because when you see how bad things can go, how fast, and unnecessarily so, that's when you realize, how important it is that the conveyancer knows what they're doing. But apart from knowing what they're doing in sense of the law, that they have the same aim in mind, that the aim is the successful completion of this one transaction, where all parties have already agreed because there's an offer. But also, if something was to go wrong, looking for a solution rather than trying to create drama out of it, because potentially then that's something you can hand over to a litigation department. And I've seen it so many times in the past where, for whatever reason, you're dealing with a conveyancer, the seller chose a conveyancer that has their priorities wrong. And you can literally, as a third party, we are removed as an agent, but we can see every step of the way. So I immediately can spot when someone is starting to create friction,
Yes.
and to create drama. You start recognizing the language.
Yeah.
If someone uses a sentence, "This is a litigation matter," from a quick a disagreement that just happened, then you're like, where are you going with this, and why? Who's going to win here? So I guess I'm curious. There are a lot of conveyancers in South Africa. What is your feeling about? There's been so many articles of late where conveyancers are saying no, but agents shouldn't have a preferred conveyancer, and they should, they can't force the owner to choose anyone. Which 100% I fully agree with that. But how do you feel about in general, are there too many conveyancers out there? Are they, should they only do conveyancing? Should they be doing other stuff as well? In which case they can pull in a different direction for a specific transaction. What do you think is happening right now?
So firstly, what as I was saying earlier, one of the things that I love about conveyancing is it's not just about the law. I feel that I'm a businesswoman with a law degree. I love the business side of it, because I'm running a business. I'm running a practice, but it's a business.
Yeah.
And how do I generate my business?
Yeah.
And as attorneys, in terms of the legal practice rules and what we are allowed and not allowed to do. We cannot tout for business, and we cannot market directly to the public. So we can't knock on doors like you can,
Okay.
and engage with somebody and say, can I be your agent?
Yes.
Give me an opportunity to market myself to you. We don't do that as attorneys. We're not allowed to do that as attorneys.
So what are you allowed to do to make yourself known?
So of course we market our brand,
Okay.
but we market our brand. We don't knock on people's doors and say, here's my card. When you sell one day, please appoint me as your attorney. We don't have that direct access to the market, although we market ourselves in the market. Okay. So I have always recognized in building my business that I need to surround myself with like-minded people and business people, and make a contribution to their lives so that they can make a contribution to my life. Because that's what business partners do. Okay. And therefore, personally, I have marketed myself as a trainer, as somebody who takes the call any day, weekday or weekend, holiday, nighttime, to be there to assist the agent, my business partner, in what they do, and hopefully build that relationship so that it can be reciprocal. It can be a business partnership, prove myself to be on their panel. I fully understand why estate agents, build relationships with a panel of attorneys, because they also want to align themselves with like-minded business partners who they know puts the transaction, the best interest of that transaction, makes that the priority. And so, that's how I've engaged with my business partners that I work with. I'm available to them, I train them, I assist them. There are many transactions where I have helped estate agents close the deal, where I've negotiated those deals, and the seller has appointed their attorney. But that's what you do. That's how you build your brand. That's how you build your name, whether you receive the transaction or not. What we know for sure is that the agent cannot tell the seller which attorney to use. The right is afforded to the seller to appoint the attorney, and that right remains with the seller. But to recommend to the seller a few names, whether the seller wants to call all those names and interview them or not, that is up to the seller. At the end of the day, that is up to the seller. It's not up to the estate agent to determine who the seller is going to appoint to be the conveyancer.
I see it almost like when you want to change hairdressers and you put a message out on the group that you trust and you say, give me recommendations.
Yeah.
So they'll give you 10, you can choose one.
Exactly.
Or you can choose none of them.
Exactly.
And still go your way.
Exactly.
As long as you have that option.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is how we've always seen it as agents. But it is interesting how we've also seen when someone goes for my cousin or, my sister's new boyfriend, and that person is only doing it on the side. So what I wanted to understand in your profession, and to give a background in real estate, often we get approached by people who say, I want to join you, I want to become an agent. I know we're supposed to be called property practitioners, but, everyone understands what estate agent is, and that's easier rolls off the tongue easier. But someone says, I want to become an agent as a part-time job, you know, that I'll do a couple of hours a day or a week or whatever, and I always say, then you're never going to be successful. It is just not possible. The work is so all absorbing, because it is not just, you know, in your head you imagine, okay, I'll just get one house and I'll sell one house every 6 months, but how do you get it? The work that you require to do to get
Yeah.
that one house. So I imagine for conveyancers it would be the same, but you can tell me, can you be a litigation attorney who is also part-time conveyancer, and how successful will you be?
So firstly, in order to be a conveyancer, you need to qualify as a conveyancer. So all conveyancers are attorneys. They all have a law degree. They were all did their articles, got admitted as attorneys, and then conveyancers wrote a further exam. It's a further qualification, and you could get admitted in the High Court as a conveyancer, just the way you got admitted as an attorney.
Okay.
Okay. So if you're not admitted as a conveyancer, then you can't do conveyancing.
Okay.
Then you cannot be a conveyancer.
Okay.
I think a lot of your clients have friends or siblings or cousins who are attorneys, but are not necessarily conveyancers. They want to appoint their friend attorney as the conveyancer to attend to that transaction. In those instances, that attorney will then refer it to a conveyancer within their practice to attend to that matter.
So you're getting
Yeah.
a middleman.
That sometimes happens, but that would be something for your estate agent to understand. So if the seller says to the estate agent, this is my attorney, then the estate agent needs to find out who the attorney is and the conveyancer is, and then they would know. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. There's nothing wrong with the seller appointing his brother who specializes in labor law, but who has a partner who does conveyancing. That is the seller's choice. You just need to understand if that's what's happening and know who to engage with. Are you engaging with the seller's brother, or are you engaging with the seller's brother's partner who is the conveyancer?
Okay.
So, you know, and in my experience, I mean, why do things go wrong?
Yes.
Why do things go wrong in a property transaction? I've learned, I mean, I've seen it all. Okay. There are a lot of things
Don't tempt
that
fate.
can
I'm
make
sure when you say that,
a
then
property
more comes.
transaction go wrong.
Yeah.
But in my experience, what causes unhappiness, what causes the most unhappiness for the seller and the buyer, is a lack of communication. And that's where things go wrong. It's just because the conveyancer is not communicating to the seller and the buyer, or the agent and the conveyancer are not communicating with each other. And so understanding from day one who the parties are to the transaction, who the business partners are in the transaction, who the agent is, who the attorney is, and managing that, because you, as the agent acting for the seller, you're also managing it. And therefore I can understand for you sometimes if it goes to an attorney that you don't know, or the seller's attorney is a friend based in KZN, and the seller's insisting on using that attorney. Well, that's the right afforded to them. But there may be a bit of discomfort on your agent's side because now it's an attorney in KZN and the buyer can't understand why it's going to an attorney in KZN. Managing that communication and communicating it properly, and knowing that if it doesn't get managed properly, that could cause discontent between the parties or for one of the parties. It's just understanding that from day one and dealing with it. So, the seller has the right to appoint the conveyancer. Not all attorneys are conveyancers.
Okay.
You know, for you to understand that. But there are many attorneys who do conveyancing and also general practice.
Okay.
You know, it's not always their only focus. that's their right. That's how they've chosen to do it, and that's how they want to do it. Personally, for me, I only do conveyancing. So if somebody contacts me on a litigious matter or for a family law matter, then I refer it to one of my partners. I don't directly get involved in that. I only focus on conveyancing. You know, I find it to be a very stressful environment and also a very labor intensive environment. For us as conveyancers whose fees are regulated by a tariff, we need the volumes.
Yes.
We need the volumes to generate, you know, our income. And therefore it's a factory. You know, I see it, my business as a factory. It's paperwork, it's labor intensive. For me to generate the volumes that I require, I need a lot of hands involved. To ensure that that whole process runs very smoothly. We know that property transaction on average takes about 2 months, 2 to 3 months. There's a lot of work that goes into one deal that you have on your desk for 2 months. A lot of work. You can't do it on your own. You know, depending on how many deals you have and how many deals you need, you know, to make your business successful. So I personally have built my business around just focusing on conveyancing, different aspects of conveyancing, but only property transactions.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it does make sense also because if you see 1,000 transactions, your experience will be 1,000-fold versus if you're doing it on the side and you do one transaction a month, then you know in the however many years you're doing it, you just have less experience. So if you want to do it as a side job, sure you can, but if you want to build it as a business, which is what you have done, you do need to get full into it. So how long does it take to study to become a conveyancer? So you would do how many years as an attorney and then afterwards to specialize?
Yeah, so we're talking about our mutual age earlier. Years ago when I studied, and I studied at the University of Pretoria, I did a BA,
Okay.
LLB, a BA law with an LLB. So that was a 5-year course.
Okay.
I think now it's 4 years.
Okay.
And then you do your articles.
Okay.
And while you do your articles, you write your board exams, and then you're admitted as an attorney. To be admitted as a conveyancer, you need to pass an exam.
Okay.
You need to pass 2 exams. It's a theory, the theory and the practical side of it.
Okay.
And once you've passed those 2 exam papers, then you can be admitted as a conveyancer. Personally, what happened in my career is I did my board exams and my conveyancing exams at the same time as I was doing my articles, and I got admitted as an attorney and a conveyancer at the same time.
Oh, okay.
And with no real experience in conveyancing.
Okay.
I did have experience in conveyancing where I did my articles. They had a big conveyancing practice, and even at that time I wasn't really thinking that that's what I wanted to do. But I found a bit of comfort in the business side of it, and seeing it as one transaction. It's not a court case that goes on for 3 years.
Oh,
You know, I
yes.
like that. I like that you can start it and finish it and end it quickly.
Yes.
And so I started liking that idea of understanding how that transaction works. I wrote my exams.
Yeah.
I passed my exams. Eventually, I did get an oral for one of the papers. It's a very, very difficult exam. If you speak to attorneys, they will say to you that the conveyancing exam is the exam that's everybody's scared of. I mean, the board exams are tough. They really, really are tough, make no mistake.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of attorneys who never write the conveyancing exam because they don't want to be conveyancers.
Yeah.
But within the within our industry, it's a well-known fact that it's a very, very difficult exam. And if you look at the pass rates, I mean, it's individuals who pass annually.
Oh,
It's
wow.
not groups of people that pass. It's
Okay.
individuals in the different provinces that pass. It's very,
Okay.
very difficult. Because it's not just a business, even though I emphasize that a lot because I love that part
Okay.
of my practice. It is law. It is risky.
Yeah.
You take so much responsibility, in managing that transaction and making sure that it doesn't become a disputed transaction and applying the law. Every clause of that sale agreement is governed by a law. And understanding that law and applying that law and making sure your clients, the sellers and the buyers, understand what they've signed and fulfill their obligations and fulfill their contractual obligations timeously with all the paperwork and the admin that happens in the background by the factory that you are also managing, because you're managing the timelines. You're still a lawyer. You still need to keep that transaction together and make sure that you do so in terms of the law and complying with every single regulation and law that applies to that transaction.
Yeah. So, speaking of that, also, I think maybe you explain more, but things are changing a lot. I've been an agent for quite a few years, and there's definitely much heavier onus now on us. But I'm sure it will be the same with you guys in terms of paperwork, making sure all your checks are done. But now with the much heavier weight we've got from FIC in terms of background checks and all that. And I believe that's going in the right direction, because we hopefully as South Africa is going to be seen as handling money laundering and any form of illegal activities better. But how have you found conveyancing has progressed over the years? When you started, were you having a 50-page pack that you submitted at the deeds office and now you have 500, or what have you seen over the years?
It's a difficult question to answer because there's a part of me that wants to say that it's harder, but there's another part of me that wants to say that it's actually a lot easier. So firstly, I want to say that I'm really proud of our deeds registry and how we do it in South Africa. I love the way how we do it. I've always been very proud of that. And with our government offices, the deeds office, COJ, SARS. Of course, we know that you might not be happy with the electricity hikes or how much you're paying for rates and taxes, but that process of obtaining rates clearance figures and the rates clearance certificate, it's a process that works. So I don't think that the South African system is a difficult system.
The structure.
The structure. And how we as attorneys engage with the government officers and what we put together to go to the deeds office, to pass transfer and to give that buyer their title deed. I love that system. I buy into that system. I'm proud of that system. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. And where I've found real changes is in legislation, holding us more accountable as attorneys, as estate agents, in our businesses, to make sure that we act in terms of the law. So the PPRA, making sure that the estate agents do what they need to do in terms of the law. And like you see now with the property condition reports, those extra things that estate agents need to do, which should have been done and was done by many estate agents. Maybe not a form, but they would hold the seller's hand and say, walk me through your property. I'm kicking it with my footsteps in front of the buyer. Show me your property. And then hold the buyer's hand and say, I'm now going to show you the property, warts and all, because that is what you are buying footsteps. Many agents did do that, but many agents did not do that.
Yeah.
So things had to change. And the industry feels there's more responsibility on us. There's more that we need to do. But actually, it's what should always have been done.
Yeah.
And I find a lot of comfort in ticking boxes. I'm a ticking box person. We spoke about that
Yes.
earlier. Doing your to-do list
Yeah.
and ticking the boxes. I actually find comfort in that. I knowing and understanding what I need to do and then doing it. So I sometimes find it strange when estate agents say there's so much more to do. And yes, there is. And make no mistake, it's a tough industry that estate agents find themselves in. It's hard work. You deserve your commission. You really do. And now you're doing even more work. But I think if you see it as something that makes your life easier, if you see it that way, you may be working harder, but it's actually going to make your life and your job easier. I think once there's that mind shift, it just makes it easier for you in any event. So, if you look at FICA, and we talk about FICA all the time, the reality is, Marisha, we are not going to move off that grey list. And interest rates, despite everybody's best efforts, are not going to be where you may want them to be.
Yeah.
Unless accountable institutions and industries start buying in, understanding and accepting of what they need to do to make this better.
Yeah.
And one of them is FICA. And it's years later, and things change every year, but I still hear the same complaints. I still hear the same anxiety. I still hear the same, maybe without saying it, but saying it, don't want to do it. Once you accept, this is my responsibility, this makes things better. Firstly for me, but then for my seller and my buyer and my deal and the industry as a whole, and the market as a whole. And I just need to be ticking a few boxes, understanding what those boxes are, taking those boxes seriously, and then ticking those boxes. Then you just get on with it.
Yeah, I think, speaking of estate agents, what I've seen, and I fully agree with you, I actually embrace the rules, because it's easier for me if you know what the rules are and the expectations are to do exactly that, because that's how I'm wired. I'm low. I might be a risk taker in the sense of running a business is a risk, but I'm very low risk in terms of doing stuff outside of the limitations or the requirements, within your legal requirements in your profession. But as estate agents, what I think the problem is, that for many years it was perceived almost not really as a profession, but as something to do because you can't get another job,
Yes.
or as something to do on the side because you bored.
Yes.
And it was very easy. Even now, it's they're enforcing a lot of requirements in terms of education, but that has literally been the last 2 years.
Yes.
Prior to that, I want to call myself an agent. There I go. Want to sell houses? There I go. What do I know? No one knows. And it was, it was very loosely read. So I'm embracing that. I think the only thing in terms of estate agents, I think for you guys as legal minds with the foundation, FICA was easier because
Yes.
it does fall within that. But estate agents, we immediately try to implement everything that we are asked to do.
Yes.
But there was so much gray areas. And funny enough, last week we had a visit from the FICA officers.
Oh, really?
And it was lovely. And I wish they did it on day one when they started, requiring agents to do more in terms of FICA, because they put such clarity into
Yes.
what we were supposed to, adjust. There were very minor amendments, but by this point, we're 2 years into the agony
Yes.
of putting together an RMCP, talking to different consultants, every consultant giving you a different idea, every person trying to make it overcomplicated,
Yeah.
because if you sign up for this one system for this huge amount of money, and that's where I think a lot of people are pushing back, especially your one-man shows or
Yes.
small companies with 25 people in
Yeah.
our company. There's companies of 5 people.
Yes.
For that kind of person to be told you must pay, and there's some online solutions that are offered at 6 to 10,000 rand a month. That is obscene for a small company, over and above all the other expenses that you're running.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably where a lot of the people are pushing back.
Yes.
And of course, the people that have that mindset of, but this should be easy. I
Yeah.
should just be selling houses without
Exactly.
complying with anything. Those people,
Yeah.
I've got nothing to say to them. But I'm curious how many times, we doing our FICA, thankfully, just by virtue of asking for documentation, I feel the wannabe scammers or money launderers then just disappear from us and go for easier targets. But have you guys had experience where you definitely have identified certain individuals and you've had to terminate business because now they're trying to bring money into the country by nefarious ways, or just use a property transaction for illegal activities?
Yeah. So we know. I mean, common sense tells us that property transactions is an easy way to launder money.
Yes.
That is why it's so important for your industry and my industry to be FIC compliant, and why we are audited all the time. It starts with the RMCP and putting one in place, buying into it, understanding it, because once again, that gives you a sense of security, a sense of comfort. When the estate agents understand that and they understand what they need to do, then it makes it easier for them. I often hear estate agents say, I'm trying to get a mandate from a seller, and I have asked the seller for the FICA, and the seller says, but another estate agency is not asking me that. I mean, that's a problem with the industry, and the industry needs to better regulate that and make sure that everybody is doing their jobs properly. But I always say to that agent who phones me and says to me, I'm going to lose this mandate to another agency because they are not complying with the FIC rules, or they say they're not, they're not asking the seller for any FICA. I say to them, so for which agency would you want to work? and then they keep quiet because they're so focused on that deal that they're potentially losing. And then when I say to them, okay, but for which agency, knowing this is happening, aren't you happy where you are?
Mm.
And then they'll say, Anastasia, now that you say that, yes, of course I am. So I say to them, so you're going to choose this agency again, knowing what has just happened? And they say yes. And I say, well, there you go. Let that one go. Let that one go. Sometimes, you pick your fights, you choose your battles. Sometimes you need to let it go because you're doing the right thing and because you're not going to compromise on doing the right thing. So I find comfort in my RMCP. I find comfort in the fact that I've got a FICA compliance officer and I drive her crazy. I really do. But the rules in my RMCP guide me on what to do, depending on the situation and at what time in the transaction to do what I'm going to do. Based on the RMCP and the guidelines and how I risk assess a transaction, whether I think it's suspicious or not. And remember, making that risk assessment, it's not an objective risk assessment. It's a subjective risk assessment. And I struggled with that in the beginning. It's like, am I being objective when I think this is suspicious?
Yeah.
And I had to keep telling myself, it's what I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the person next to me would have thought. It's what I think. And if I do think it's suspicious, I follow my rules with regards to what I need to do if I think it's suspicious. And those things happen on a daily basis. Do my risk assessments on a daily basis. Sometimes I'm suspicious about something, I then follow the rules. Sometimes I think, should I be suspicious about it? I think about it. I'm like, no, I'm not suspicious about it. I asked the questions. I've verified everything. I've had another chat. I've sent another email to the seller. I'm not suspicious. And I'm confident with that risk assessment that I've made because I've followed the rules and I've ticked the boxes that I've had to tick in order to get to that point.
So how do you see something suspicious? Would it be a purchaser bringing money from different accounts? What would render a transaction suspicious, let's say from a purchaser's point of view, first of all?
So FICA actually sets out examples of what are suspicious, potentially suspicious transactions. So it starts from day one. If your buyer refuses to give you FICA and is pushing back in giving you FICA, that's suspicious.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a client just being difficult or being busy or not having access to a scanner and a printer. That is potentially suspicious. When payments are made, but they're not coming from the buyer, third parties, other companies. Because remember, you need to identify the source. You need to know who your buyer is, but you also need to know who the money is, where that money is coming from, with what money is your buyer purchasing that property, and why is your buyer paying that money from an account that's not in the buyer's name? Or if it is from a company, is your buyer a director of that company or a shareholder of that company, the beneficial owner in that, behind that company, delving deep down to see who actually owns that money? Where is that money coming from? So it's not necessarily suspicious if the money doesn't come from the buyer, but the light bulbs need to go up, and you need to do what you need to do in terms of your RMCP to be able to tick those boxes. And only once you've done that do you then assess, is it suspicious or not suspicious?
And what do you guys do as conveyancers when there's a pending transaction? And what would be the worst case scenario? Would you then stop the transaction and terminate the relationship, or will you report it to FICA and let them deal with it, whichever way they would go ahead?
Yeah. I don't exercise the discretion of stopping a transaction.
Yes.
And remember, a suspicion is merely a suspicion.
Yes.
It doesn't mean to say that that's fact.
Yeah.
So the rules say I must report the matter,
Yes.
but the rules allow me to proceed with the matter.
Okay.
What's very, very important in terms of the rules and in terms of the law is I make an assessment, depending on what the assessment is. I report if I feel I need to, but that is nobody's business.
Yeah.
It's not something I discuss with the seller. It's not something I discuss with the buyer. It's not something I discuss with the agent.
Yeah.
It's me as an accountable institution and FIC.
Yeah.
That's it. And I carry on with the matter.
Okay.
You are not allowed
Yeah. To
discuss your suspicions with anybody. I'm not allowed to tell you that I've reported a seller or a buyer in one of your matters.
And the same would apply to the agents.
You need to do your own risk
Yes.
assessment. Sorry, Marisha, you need to do your own risk assessment, and I do mine. We don't share that information with each other.
Yeah, yeah. 100%. And I think it's so important for the public to understand exactly what you were saying, where we hear it all the time. Buyers would say, I'll go to another agency that doesn't ask me, often. And I say to my colleagues, because they feel like they, now I've lost the opportunity to earn, because we don't earn if we don't finalize deals. And I'll say to them, but that most likely wasn't going to be anything. Now, number one, but you don't know, if that person is just threatening you, or they register outrage often, you're insulting me. And I've recently someone said to me, that I'm insulted, why are you questioning, where my money is coming from and whatever the story was, or who I am, the details. So I said, but by the time you are purchasing a property, you have to provide all this information. So whether you provide it now, first of all, it is law that you provide it now. But, even if you were just taking me, I can't be insulting you. I don't know you. It's the first conversation I'm having with you. So why would I trust? Oh, yeah, the words are, you don't trust me often. But why would I? I don't know who you are. I've never met you. I'm just hearing a voice. And on that note, we often come across that situation where someone will fill an offer, and our sellers cannot understand, why am I on offer number 10 and nothing's ever transpired? These people just disappear. Why are they disappearing? Yeah. And I'm finding, and you can give me further insight into that, but I'm finding often that's the case of them just wanting the personal information of that seller. I don't know. Are they taking then that signed offer and extorting money from someone else, pretending to be buying something? Or are they doing it so they can break into someone's email and, try and get money diverted that way? What have you experienced in that sense of criminality? Why these people are signing offers and disappearing?
Yeah. I don't know. I can't answer that question.
But you see a lot of those.
I do see it.
Yeah.
And when I see it exactly to your point. I see it on deals where I get the transaction. I'm asking the purchaser for the FICA. The purchaser's not getting back to me. I speak to the agent. I say, did you get FICA for the purchaser? And they say, no. On this deal, I've been asking the purchaser for the 3 weeks since they saw the property, and I've never received it. That deal should not have happened. It's on the deals that should not have happened that they don't happen. Eventually they don't happen. They don't register.
True.
So to your point, what you were saying earlier, the agent says, I've now lost them. You may have kept them if you bent the rules, but the deal wouldn't register. You know, if that is what they're doing, if they are trying to do something suspicious. Sometimes people just don't get to it. Sometimes people are just really irritated that you've asked them for it. And they put it, it's the last thing on their to-do list. It is on their to-do list, but it's the last thing on their to-do list. That's not suspicious.
Yeah, true.
But if you follow your guidelines and you follow your rules and you think about it, you're going to have a feeling for whether it's suspicious or not. And you must go with that feeling. It's a subjective feeling, but you must go with it. And they may want to repatriate those funds.
So it's for the sale, but what happens with that withholding tax when you're selling a property if you're a foreigner and taking the money? Yeah.
Yep. So if you're a non-resident and the selling price exceeds 2 million rand, you can, and you introduced the money into the country correctly, you can repatriate your proceeds, except for the portion that is withheld in lieu of capital gains tax and in terms of the law. And the law is very clear. It says the attorney and or the estate agent need to make sure that amount is retained and paid over to SARS, unless, of course, the client receives a SARS directive before transfer.
Okay.
So if you're a non-resident seller, natural person, 7%, 7.5%? I'm not sure. We need to double check that, but I think it's 7.5% of the purchase price needs to be withheld in lieu of CGT. If it's a company, it's 10%. If it's a trust, it's 15%.
Okay.
Where the selling price exceeds 2 million. Okay.
Regardless whether the purchase price was. So let's say if you bought for 5 million and you sold for 5.
You don't even look at that.
Okay.
All you look at is the non-resident. Is the selling price 2 million rand or more?
Yeah.
Then there's an automatic withholding of capital gains tax.
Okay.
Unless the client obtains a directive from SARS. So as a conveyancer, I immediately engage with the clients. I say to them, as per this clause in the contract, I now know who you are because I've FICA'd you. I know where you are. We are going to have to retain CGT here. And most of them say, no, it's not applicable to me for whatever reason.
I made a loss on the property or whatever.
And we start engaging and then we say, I see that you've made a loss, but it's not for you to tell me that you've made a loss. I need SARS to come back to me.
Okay.
With a zero tax directive.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm compelled to withhold that money and pay it over to SARS.
And how easy is it for them to get the directive? Obviously, it's out of your control, but...
So it can be in our control. At STBB, we do have a non-resident department.
Okay.
So I don't directly do that, but many times I introduce my sellers to my partners in that department, and we assist. Okay. And if you start that process in the beginning of the transaction, so if you start having a conversation with your sellers in the beginning of the transaction, start actioning it in the beginning of the transaction, you'll have your tax directive long before you lodge.
Oh.
But it's something that needs to be picked up right in the beginning.
Yes.
And we're all human, and we deal with volumes, and many times the agreement that I get from the estate agent, where it gives me the seller's details, it gives me the address of the property but that's being sold. But actually, the seller is sitting in Spain. I don't know that. I don't know that on day 1.
Yes.
I don't even know that on day 5, because I don't even know that maybe on day 30, because we're emailing each other, they're calling me, or we're on WhatsApp. And the contract says to me it's a property in Pretoria.
Yes.
But when I then get the FICA from the seller and I look at everything and I start properly engaging with them and they're telling me they're overseas, that's only when I find it out. So maybe it is only on day 20 that I then say, oh, what about CGT? But if you catch it soon enough and you deal with it soon enough, it can easily be resolved prior to registering the matter.
But is that only applicable if they want the money out of the country, even if it remains in the country?
Yeah.
So
So to determine whether you're retaining CGT, you don't ask that question. Am I repatriating the funds? Am I, on behalf of the seller, am I helping the seller to take the funds out of the country? That's not the question. It's what is the selling price and are they a non-resident?
that's it.
Yeah. And non-resident doesn't mean foreigner.
Can
It
be
could be a
South
South African who's no longer a resident, who's not living in South Africa,
Yeah.
who's living in Australia or
So
the
no
UK
longer
or wherever.
submitting tax returns.
I don't even go there.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
see.
I look at, are they here? Are they not here? And that's where we start.
Ah.
And then we take it from there.
So what happens when often we hear this? Someone says, "Now I'll buy this property, but I have foreign accounts, so I'll pay some of the money." I see the seller is also, let's say, dual citizen,
Yes.
and let's offer half the money to be paid overseas. So then the transaction is a lower amount. So then the transfer fees, and so on. So what are the legalities around? Can they just pay overseas? But, and I'm assuming I know what you're going to answer me, but what are you declaring in South Africa in terms of that transaction?
Yeah. So there's so many things that's risky with that. And I always say to a seller and a buyer, there's nobody standing with a gun, in front of you and saying you are not allowed to do that. Nobody's going to stop you from doing that. If the buyer is going to pay the money from their UK account into the seller's UK account and not introduce it into South Africa, well, that's what's going to happen. But it's so risky, and because it's not the conveyancer has no control over that. What happens if the matter never transfers and the buyer has put money in the seller's account? I can't think that anybody in their right minds would take those type of risks. And I would never, ever condone that. I would always tell them about the risks and challenge them, and advise them and caution them and not to do that. But I suppose it can be done. I don't do it because I say no, but it can be done. The big problem is what has then been introduced into the country, what has been declared, and the future problems of taking money out. You didn't introduce it into South Africa, and the questions that will be answered then. And when you explain to your buyer, because the buyer is focusing on now, but when you explain to your buyer the future, they always say no, because then they really understand the risks, because then they get it. So I always recommend to an estate agent when they're in that situation, it's not your job to answer those questions. Speak to a conveyancer that you work with that's on your panel, or speak to your seller's attorney. The seller's already said to you who they want to appoint when they sell the property. Speak to that attorney and ask that attorney to have the conversation with the buyer.
Yeah. Because often what I see there is they want to buy a house for 10 million, but they want to make it a 5 million house so that the transfer cost from 1.2 million is 500,000 or whatever. And my thinking behind it is, and my advice is always, it's all good and well. When things go wrong, you have nothing. You're exactly what you said. If that transaction never happened, that's that buyer's just paid money into. We don't have control over other laws or other countries, but we're getting a lot more. And I call those window shoppers. We literally have a thing in the office. It's people that just talk, but we keep getting those questions. No, but I'm going to pay in a overseas tax-free account and all that. And I, because I'm low risk in each transaction, my answer is always, but bring the money into the country. The seller can decide what to do with the money. If they, if they want to still take it out, there's legal ways you can do so. But we had to investigate at some point a bank guarantee given by overseas bank, because that buyer was claiming he'll give a bank guarantee, but it will be, and I forget now the name of the bank, but it was an international bank. And we went down the route of investigating quite a bit. Is it the same thing as a South African bank guarantee? And it wasn't.
It's not, and it's not acceptable to the
We,
seller.
we literally went and we found it was a bank based in the UK. We got to, their call center, we asked those questions. And I said to the seller, but what are you saving here versus what your risk is?
Yeah.
So it wasn't worth it, and it never went further. But now we're hearing a lot crypto. Can I pay you in Bitcoin? Does the South African Deeds Office, or do they recognize Bitcoin as not?
So as far as I'm aware, in our company, I think there's been maybe one or two, not in my practice, transactions where the parties wanted to engage with Bitcoin. And to be quite honest with you, Marusha, I don't even know what happened there. But I've never. But my understanding is, that's not a form of acceptable guarantee at the moment. So we're not dealing with that yet. The thing is, with regards to foreign funds, okay, is we don't know the bank laws of other countries. So foreign guarantee is not acceptable. That money must come into South Africa. And also what sellers don't understand when they agree to contract with a buyer who thinks they're getting a benefit by not declaring the full purchase price, okay, and therefore it's a lower, the seller's going to pay more capital gains tax. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. The buyer is going to pay more capital gains tax, and we know
Later
the buyer's
on.
non-resident, okay,
Yes.
when they sell one day, because they deflated the purchase price when they bought, and who knows what the market's going to look like when they sell. It's a short-sighted, quick perceived gain now, which many will say is illegal,
Yeah.
okay, and risky, not just for the seller and the buyer, but for the estate agent that is
Yeah.
a party to that agreement and or accepts the benefits of that agreement and may know what is going on.
Yeah.
Because think about it, does that type of an agreement sound suspicious to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens if it was that agreement that was on the desk last week, as you said, or last month, when the FICA officers were here, and they start asking questions on that matter,
Yeah.
and the agent knew what was going on that matter? That's how risky it is. That's how quickly things and easily, you make that decision and you think, it makes sense, it's easy, it's better for the seller, it's better for the buyer. But is it really? And is it better for our market? And is it better for our industry? And is it better for our obligations towards SARS, in paying tax on the fair market values of the properties? And another thing that buyers forget is, because sometimes the market dictates that the value of the property is not what it is on record.
Yeah.
Especially in Gauteng, that's happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
So of course, sellers are selling their properties for less than what they were hoping for, not because they're doing something dodgy, but because that's what the market dictates. Yeah. Okay. And sometimes I always find it interesting, when I get a transaction and I open the matter and I do my checks that I need to do. I obviously do a deed search to see who my seller is, the property, do my checks and balances on a deal. And it's always interesting for me. It's just something that I do. Look and see what the seller bought for and now what the seller is selling for. Because that's also for me an indication of the market.
Yes.
Just trying to understand the market. What year did the sellers buy, now they're selling, and looking at the prices. And I mean, in the past 18 months, we've seen it. They're selling for sometimes the same is what they bought it for. And that was 8 years ago or 10 years ago or
Yeah.
even less. I
Yeah.
mean, it's sad, it's sad and it's unfortunate, and we hope that really changes, but that's what's been happening. However, I have dealt on matters where SARS has asked for independent valuations
Yeah.
because they really want to check and see that that is in fact what the market is dictating. And there have been instances where SARS has said, we accept the selling price. That's what the seller wants, that's fine. But we want transfer duty
On the higher.
on the higher amount.
Yeah.
And so if you do a deal where it's 10 million rand, but you're doing it for 6 million rand because 4 million rand is being paid overseas and it's not coming through the books, your buyer thinks it's a benefit to them because the costs and the tax is on a lower amount.
Yeah.
But SARS may insist on transfer duty being paid on the fair market value. And if there's such a big discrepancy between what SARS thinks the fair market value is and what the selling price actually is, they ask questions. And I don't know about you, Marusha, but I never want SARS to ask any questions of me.
No.
I don't want them to even know I exist.
Yes.
I pay and I do what I need to
Yes.
do,
Yeah.
but I don't want any spotlight on
Yeah.
me. I'm fearful of SARS, and I should be.
Yeah.
And make sure that I pay my taxes and I pay them properly. So the buyer does not want SARS to be looking at them.
Yeah.
So do it properly.
Yeah.
Do it properly, and then they won't be looking at you.
So hypothetically, if I'm the buyer and I wanted to buy in Bitcoin, as a conveyancer, and the seller is allowed to receive Bitcoin, as a conveyancer, will you then take the value of the day? So let's say, I don't know what Bitcoin's worth, but let's call it, I'm paying 10 million worth. If I was to sell the Bitcoin today, I will be getting 10 million. But I don't want. I just want to transfer to the seller. Would you then? What are you registering with the deeds office and SARS? Are you declaring 10 million?
Yeah, look, as I say, I
Or
haven't
are you
done that
not even?
before, and I don't know if it can be done. I mean,
I
I need
read
to
an
properly
article that
investigate
one
that.
transaction was done somewhere in Cape Town.
Yeah,
Cape
yeah,
Town's always the
yeah,
the leader
yeah.
in property markets in South Africa. So that article was sometime last year. So there wasn't obviously any detail of the technicalities around it, but we had one of our window shoppers a week ago who was phoning all our agents and saying he will be buying he said 7 or 8 properties. That's already, for me, it was like, yeah, we just we're now talking, but he was claiming, no, it will be Bitcoin because he has X amount of multiples of millions worth of Bitcoin. And it just got me thinking, surely if it is a legal means of transaction, but you still have to declare something and you still have to get transfer duty. So it will be interesting to find out actually what would happen.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, I'm definitely not an expert there. In fact, I don't even know what the answers are there. What I can tell you is that the costs can't be paid in Bitcoin. Transfer duty
So
can't be
SARS
paid
doesn't
in
have a Bitcoin wallet or whatever.
No. And if they did, there'd be a lot of transactions being done in Bitcoin, and they're not.
Yeah.
So it's not an acceptable form of securing the purchase price,
Okay.
as far as I'm
At this
concerned,
stage.
until it is.
Yeah.
Until it is.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's I think we probably will be encountering this at some point.
Yes.
Maybe not just yet, but
Yeah.
it will be coming.
Yeah.
And what is your take, speaking of Bitcoin, on the role of AI in conveyancing? Are you guys looking into implementing some automations and artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I do think that there's an acceptance and an understanding of the world that we find ourselves in. I mean, we're not fearful and panicking. We don't believe that the robots are going to take over, or AI is going to take over our businesses. But we do understand that we need AI. We need we need to work with AI to be better in the world that we're going into. And if we don't, our competitors will. And so we will lose our jobs to our competitors who have embraced AI,
Yeah.
not lose our jobs to AI.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. And so, I serve on our executive committee, or our exec. I'm an executive partner at STBB, and we meet every Wednesday. We have meetings, and we talk about this all the time. And we talk about where we want to take our business to, and so absolutely we're embracing it, and but it's still early stages for us in making sure that we do it properly, that we all understand what we are doing here, that we are protecting our data, our personal data, personal information of our clients. How do we do this? How do we do it properly? So we're taking our time with it because we want to do it properly, but we're definitely moving forward with it.
So it's basically at the moment just enhancing your performance.
Yes.
That's how we, I see it at this stage. I think because we're in such industry that there's so much human element, the emotions. It's. I don't think we're there yet where we can replace both our jobs with just AI, because it's just not you're not able to handle the emotions that or even to spot where things are starting to go wrong, because if you've done this long enough, you see it way before the buyer or the seller sees it, and you are able to bring people back. Or if you don't keep an eye out, then obviously things can go terribly wrong.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of what we do that's admin. And that's where I see the benefit of AI.
Yes.
Systems, processes, paperwork, admin, the drafting, the checking, those type of things. But engaging with the seller and the buyer and building a relationship with the client and managing that client and managing the client's expectations, unless you understand it and you're invested in it emotionally yourself, I don't believe you can give the clients what they really need.
So now that you've been involved in property for so long, have you started investing in property yourself, or knowing everything about property has turned you away from buying property as an investor?
I don't know about you, but I'm really good at managing my clients and looking after my clients and giving them really good advice with regards to what to buy and where to buy and when to buy it. But when it comes to me, I just ignore me, and only focus on the clients. So I've had these aspirations of building a property portfolio and even developing. I own a piece of land, quite a big piece of land, and I've had these fantasies of putting up a development or a retirement village or something, but I just I haven't got to it. Okay. So those are long term. The terms just become longer, yes, when I'm going to do it. But yes, I have invested in a few properties. It's not a business for me, It's just, if the right opportunity comes, I'll do it. But I'm not running it as a business, building up this huge property portfolio and that's how I'm going to build my wealth. Maybe I should, but I'm focusing on my business,
Okay.
which is my focus. But I have bought a few properties. I've bought sectional title, freehold, and also vacant.
And land.
Yes.
Okay. And you focused on Gauteng, but when you have your Wednesday meetings or whenever you speak to the other areas that you guys are in, what are you seeing? We know the Cape is leading, in leaps and bounds, but are you seeing Gauteng now improving? KZN, we have very little overview because we just do like literally one transaction a year. Maybe, as we grow as a company, we'll go into there as well. But from what I've heard in the last few years, has been struggling a lot, the Eastern Cape as well. What are your views, or what do you hear from your colleagues?
So our KZN branch is our baby branch.
Okay.
We only opened it a year ago. It's STBB KZN has been open for just over a year.
Okay.
So we're getting to know that market. But Cape Town, obviously, that's where our head office is. It's a totally different world. It's a different market. It comes with its own struggles, but it doesn't have the struggles that we have in Gauteng.
In what sense?
Well, first of all, anybody wants to own in Cape Town.
Okay.
There's always a buyer's market.
Okay.
And I think also, politically, people see Cape Town as a. I always tell my Cape Town partners, we talk about it, and they say, why is it so different? And I say to them, well, you live in a bubble. It's a beautiful bubble, but it's a bubble.
Yeah.
It's not like the rest of South Africa.
Yeah.
And that's what you hear. That's what you hear. It is a bit of a country on its own within a country type of thing. And I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't think that's how it should be. We are a country, but I think people see it differently, and foreign investment sees it differently.
True.
And if you look at South Africans, if you look at how many people from Gauteng have migrated to the Western Cape, not just Cape Town, but to the Western Cape, to KZN. It's not necessarily that there are differences, but it's people in their minds think it's different.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it right. That doesn't make them right. It doesn't make them wrong. It's just, and that creates then movement in the property market, and that is why we've seen it. If you look back on the past 18 months where we've agreed it's been really tough in Gauteng, it hasn't been tough in the Western Cape, speaking to my colleagues, the way it has for us. Maybe that has changed a bit. Maybe the property market, they're feeling that it's maybe not as vibrant as what it was 4 years ago. But it's not the big ebbs and flows as we find in Gauteng. I always say, in Gauteng, our ship is sailing on the Atlantic.
Okay.
In the Western Cape, the ship is sailing on the Mediterranean.
Okay.
So there'll be the odd wave,
but not
there'll
much.
be the I don't know, the island that you need to bypass or whatever, but it's not the chops and the changes of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, that's actually such an interesting example, because as we do reports of different areas in Gauteng, I've been in the game long enough to see the same area reports over year after year, and it literally there's a Gulf estate which I used to live in, and it went through a massive dip 2 years ago, where literally people were selling at 10 to 20% below what I had bought 10 years ago there. Now it's on the up again, and it's so funny. I can't even answer why. Because the location hasn't changed, the whole area hasn't changed in a sense of criminality or any or more services or any. It literally everything stayed the same. It was popular 10 years ago. It stopped being popular 2 years ago. Now it's becoming popular again. It's as simple as that. And I find it so interesting, because as an agent, obviously people always ask me what's happening with the market. A seller will ask, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it whatever? And I'm like, one thing I've learned is it's dynamic.
Yeah.
So it's ever changing. But I can't actually predict. Same as you during COVID and the 2 years after COVID was the best years we've ever had.
Yeah.
So but you didn't know that.
No.
I was making a list. My husband and I, as they announced lockdown, I was making a list of what we're going to be canceling, subscriptions and whatever, because things were going to be tough, and they were not tough in the least bit for us. But yeah, so it's just, to me, the market is the market, and you just need to, if you've decided to take a risk, you go for it. There is a risk in every decision you make. It's a risk to buy the property. It's also a risk not to buy the property, because if you didn't buy the property, where I live now, people say, wow, if I'd bought 20 years ago. Well, 20
Exactly.
years later, then the same story will apply.
Yeah.
So it's just take the risk, whichever way your appetite goes. I had an interesting conversation a couple of days ago. It's a foreign family wanting to invest in the Cape, interestingly enough. And they asked me for a report. Is there a report, a risk assessment report for the future risks of this property in terms of losing value and also in terms of issues, structural issues? And I said, but it's interesting you ask me this question, because I know you've just bought in the country where you come from. You told me you've just bought there. Does that country give you that kind of, because I don't imagine anyone being able to put their name on a report that says for the next 10 years your property will value any of those things. And they said no. So I said, well, but you bought there. No such report exists in that country, so why would you expect it here? And there was silence. So it's a perception.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's a perception.
Yeah. So very interesting industry. I love it. I also wouldn't be anywhere else. But I think for me, the takeaway has always been is people need to just use it's a big investment, like you said, and people need to be very careful when they make a decision that they've made it with all the knowledge they feel they need it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily trust, because I'm more charismatic than the next agent and now I must trust you. No, just go down to the facts.
Yes.
Because maybe the less charismatic agent's giving you better facts.
Yeah. We're doing a transaction at the moment where the buyer is a social media influencer. And she is sharing this journey. It's her first property that she's buying. She's only ever been a tenant. So she's becoming a property owner now. And she's sharing to her world and her followers this whole journey. And I'm finding it so interesting watching that and how she's experiencing it and what she's sharing and what's important to her and what's not important to her, and I thought that may be important to her, but it's not really important to her. It is just so interesting seeing it from her side.
From a first...
And seeing how she views the world that we work in and that we find ourselves in. I mean, it really is amazing and astonishing. And I think back to when, as I said earlier, I do own a few properties, but a couple of years ago, my husband and I we'd already owned properties before that, but we bought what is our forever home, and so it was our big primary residence investment. And my husband is also a conveyancer.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And
for the same firm?
Yes, he's also a director at STBB, but at another branch. And so we know what we're doing. Nobody needs to hold our hand to fill in the agreement or go and view or inspect the property or whatever. We know what we're doing. But I was so nervous. And of course, the seller had the right to appoint the attorney, and the seller appointed their attorney. And I was just so scared. It was an emotional, it was a big thing. It was a big deal. And at one stage, my husband said, you need to calm down. You know, you're a conveyancer. What is going on with you? And I said to him, I feel as if I need my hand to be held. And my husband said to me, I'll hold your hand. And I said, no, I want the estate agent to hold my hand. I want the attorney to hold my hand. As a conveyancer and an attorney, that's what I needed. Because in that moment, I was the buyer.
Yes.
You know, I wasn't a conveyancer or an attorney. I was a
Yes.
buyer. And when I look back on that, I often remind myself of that so that I never forget how stressful it is for that seller and that buyer. We often talk about our jobs and that this is a difficult industry and it's a tough industry and it's not an easy job. But for me, the most important part of the job is holding that seller and the buyer's hands. And I think when an agent does that really well, and when an attorney does that really well, then the job becomes easier.
Yeah,
You know, for me, that is the most important. It's holding their hands, because I remember that that's what I needed. I didn't really need anybody to explain the agreement to me. Okay, because I'm an attorney. Not all the buyers are attorneys. I get that. But I wanted somebody to hold my hand despite being an attorney and understanding that contract. So that's a big thing.
Yeah. So you actually needed the human element, not the email.
Yes.
You know, the documentation was what it was.
Yes.
You accept it for what it is. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think we're still gonna have jobs, eh? AI is not taking over.
No.
We're still going to be okay.
Yeah, we've got a lot still to do.
Don't know about our kids, but yeah. So far, my kids are showing no signs of joining the property industry, but you never know.
Never know.
And your son, is he showing interest?
No. No. My son's 11 years old and he still wants to be a football player. So that's where he is right now.
Well, at least he's moved past archaeologist.
Yeah. Truck driver, train driver.
Okay. Anything else you want to share that you think people should know and pay attention to? Or should people join the conveyancing world if they're looking at what professions to choose?
I think it's you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. I think it's important to know that there's a perception out there that is not law, and it really is. You know, I think, you know, for me it's a privilege to be a conveyancer, and when I do speak to young students, we've just finished interviewing for candidate attorneys, or we're in the process of still interviewing for candidate attorneys for next year. And I love engaging with them, and I love chatting to them, and I love the enthusiasm that they show. And it's really interesting to see how many of these law students want to be conveyancers, you know, and want to own property, and have already done their research and already planning, you know, for when they're going to buy, or when they're going to start renting, or they've already been renting and they want to buy. It wasn't like that at my age. You know, I wasn't even thinking of owning a property then. I find it very encouraging to see how the world has changed in that regard. People want to own, they want to buy early enough, you know, make that investment sooner rather than later, even if it's small. I love that.
It's actually such a good point you're making, because I'm seeing so many fresh out of matric kids, you know, approaching us all the time. You know, they want to join the industry, and it's refreshing. And I think definitely the entirety of the property industry has gotten a good rep of late. You know, it's becoming cool, exciting to be in property. Whereas, again, when I was growing up, that was something the old ladies did as a side job, you know, if they couldn't get anything else or whatever. So I'm glad for that. I just look forward, you know, in your case, obviously in your world, it's a full-on degree with a lot more coming afterwards. I'm looking forward to the day where people also see it from our perspective as real estate agents as a profession and something you have to study for. because it is.
Yeah.
You know, we absolutely not lawyers. We don't purport to, but we do need to understand that there's, you know, that there's legalities around every single thing that we do say, every step we take. It has massive consequences, and I absolutely embrace the fact that someone has to study for this,
Yes.
because there is a lot to learn.
Absolutely.
And you know, we've got our own we call it an academy, but we're training the practical aspects of it. But I embrace the fact that you also have to do formal qualifications for this, because it is a profession. It takes my first principal said it's going to take you 6 years before you start seeing the results and before you start feeling confident in your job. And I remember thinking, what nonsense are you talking? You know, I'm clever and I have a marketing degree, and you know, in 1 year I'll be flying. Well, I wasn't flying by any stretch.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning a lot and all that. But I think it's exciting. Property
Yeah.
is exciting. So everyone welcome, but just prepare to study a ton.
Yeah, and to work really hard,
Yes.
to work long hours,
Yes.
to work unnatural hours, actually, you
Yeah,
know,
true.
because your clients are not available to you when they're at work,
Yeah.
you know, and that is why you're working after hours, you're working weekends,
Yeah.
you make sacrifices, you
Yeah.
know, and we admire that, you know, we
Yeah.
admire that from about your industry, and also just quickly to go back to the who the agents are, and that young agents are or young people are really interested in becoming property practitioners. I think also if you look at who the buyers are and how that's changed over the years, you
Interesting.
know, the average age of purchasers, the gender of purchasers. You know, I read somewhere the other day that they were saying in the Pretoria market, the biggest group of people purchasing property in Pretoria are young black females.
Amazing.
You know,
Yeah.
so if you look at who it is that's buying, then you want to be able to pair them up with an agent who gets
Absolutely.
their world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's changing. It's
Yeah.
absolute. The landscape of real estate is changing.
Mm. No, and it's exciting. It really is, because of course then that will come with the fresh perspective, the bringing in social media into it.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, with your influencer, you know, and just doing things differently. You know, so it's definitely shaking up the industry a lot, and so it's great. Yeah, look forward to seeing what's going to happen. I mean, we've got quite a lot of people in their 20s in our company, and it's exciting because you are constantly seeing something from a different perspective and seeing how things can be done differently, and it's very often much better, you know, than what you know you thought. Yeah.
I always say in my business, listen to the older people. No, let me get that right. I always say learn from the older people. There's a reason that they are here, and listen to the younger people. There's a reason why they are here. If you can bridge that gap between the generations, you make your business stronger and you make your business better.
Yeah,
Because we've all got to learn from each other
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
listen to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that note, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Marisha.
It's been absolutely
you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.